"Are you my daddy?" a little girl asked the Millionaire's CEO in the lobby. What he did next changed everything. The low hum of morning drifted through the towering lobby of Ward Enterprises. Outside, gray clouds loomed, casting a muted tone over the city. Inside, golden lights gleamed on the polished marble floor, and the scent of coffee hung softly in the air. The sound of dress shoes echoed faintly, marking another busy day. She was small, easy to miss among the sleek glass walls and sharply dressed professionals. A little girl, around 3, with soft blonde curls and wide, curious eyes. She sat quietly on a cushioned bench, bundled in a worn beige scarf that had clearly seen many winters. Her coat hung slightly too big on her, boots scuffed and softened by time. Her chest rose and fell gently as she napped, her head tilted to one side. Slowly, she stirred. Blinking herself awake, she looked around with quiet wonder at the high ceiling, the swirling chandelier, the tall people rushing by. And then she saw him. David Ward, the CEO whose name carried weight in boardrooms around the world, was striding toward the elevators. His charcoal suit was crisp, every movement confident. He spoke into his phone with focused precision, holding a silver coffee tumbler in his free hand. He did not see her, but she saw him. Her gaze fixed on him with an intensity only a child could possess. She tilted her head slightly, studying him. Then, without hesitation, she stood up on the bench, cupped her hands around her mouth, and called out clearly, "Are you my daddy?" The entire lobby froze. David halted mid-step. Silence fell like a curtain. The receptionist looked up. A few nearby employees stopped in their tracks. He turned slowly, scanning the lobby until his eyes found her, the tiny figure on the bench, looking directly at him. He blinked. Once. Twice. What? Before he could say another word, a young woman burst from the hallway near the restrooms, her face pale, eyes wide with panic. "Deanna," she called out, hurrying toward the little girl. Her long blonde hair was messy, her coat worn thin at the cuffs. She looked exhausted. "You cannot say things like that," she scolded gently, scooping the girl into her arms. She turned quickly to the surrounding crowd, apologizing breathlessly. "I'm so sorry. I just stepped into the restroom for a moment. She was asleep. I never imagined—" She trailed off, overwhelmed. Holding the child close as if shielding her from the moment, the little girl nestled into her mother's neck but continued peeking over her shoulder, eyes still on David. The woman gave one more quiet apology. "We didn't mean to cause any trouble," and then she turned and walked swiftly toward the exit, her arms wrapped tightly around the child. She never looked back. She had no idea who he was. But David remained rooted in place. He watched her disappear through the glass doors, a pressure building in his chest he did not fully understand. That voice, that face, those eyes, he knew them. Somewhere in the far corners of his memory, those eyes had looked into his before. His lips parted. "Is that her?" he whispered, more to himself than anyone else. "It can't be, but those eyes." The glass doors slid shut behind them, but the little girl's voice echoed in David Ward's mind long after they disappeared. He stood motionless in the center of the lobby, still holding his phone, unaware of the voice on the other end. His thoughts were spinning, sharp edges dulled by something he could not quite name. The elevator chimed softly. He did not move. Instead, he turned slightly and tapped his headset. "Logan," he said, his voice low, "I want to know who she is as soon as possible." There was a pause. Then the reply came, "Yes, sir." David ended the call. No explanation. None was needed. Deep down, he already suspected what he was not ready to admit. A name rose from his memory like a shadow in the fog. A face. A night. Something long buried, but never erased. He exhaled slowly, jaw tight. Across the city, Kathy Matthews sat on a bus, her daughter curled against her chest. Diana had fallen asleep again, small arms looped around her mother's neck. Kathy stared out the fogged window, seeing nothing but blurred lights and gray sky. Her reflection in the glass looked tired, older than she remembered. She pressed a kiss to Diana's forehead, her fingers tightening around the child. The same silent prayer she had whispered for years, repeated in her mind. At the final stop, Kathy gathered her bag, hoisted Diana onto her hip, and walked 3 blocks through chilly air. Their apartment building was cracked and weather-worn, the stairwell dim and musty. Their unit, no more than 150 square feet, held the bare minimum: a springy mattress, a rusted stove, and a small, aging fridge. A single window, clouded by time and grime, overlooked a rusted fire escape. Kathy gently laid Diana on the bed and slipped off her damp scarf and coat. From the sink, she pulled a towel and dabbed the child's cheeks and arms. Her fingers trembled from fatigue, but her movements were tender. Diana opened her eyes, still heavy with sleep. "I'm sorry, Mommy," she whispered. "I dreamed about Daddy, and when I woke up I thought maybe that man was him." Kathy managed a smile and brushed back her daughter's curls. "It's okay, sweetheart. Mommy's not upset." Diana nodded, then added softly, "It's okay if I don't have a daddy. I have you. But if God gave us one who makes breakfast so you're not tired all the time, that would be nice." Kathy turned away, pretending to organize the folded laundry. Her hand fell on Diana's favorite sweater, the one with the elbow patch. The stitches were uneven, the thread a different color. "I fixed it," Diana said shyly, "so you won't have to." Kathy's eyes filled, her throat tightening. "I'll be good tomorrow," Diana added in a whisper. "I'll wait while you go to work. I won't make a mess, I promise." The sunlight, dim and dusty, filtered through the old glass, casting a warm hue across the room. Kathy climbed onto the bed and pulled her daughter into her arms, pressing her face into Diana's soft hair, the scent of baby shampoo and rain lingering faintly. "I promise, too," she whispered. "I'll give you a better life, even if I have to give everything I have left." Outside, the street lights flickered on, one by one. Inside, a mother and her daughter held each other close, 2 hearts carrying the weight of the world and each other. David sat alone in his office, high above the city skyline, the lights of the tower casting reflections on the windows as dusk settled outside. The hum of emails, meetings, and deadlines that usually filled his world had faded into a distant background. Tonight, the silence was louder than usual. He stared at the file on his desk, freshly delivered by his assistant, a thin manila folder, deceptively light for the weight it carried. Inside, the summary was short but precise. Name: Kathy Harper. No recorded spouse. Currently employed in part-time cleaning services and various short-term jobs. Previously worked as a waitress at a small diner in a coastal town, Harborville, 4 years ago. Lived alone during that time. No criminal record. Financially struggling but stable. David's eyes froze on the location. Harborville. 4 years ago, he had spent 2 weeks there. After a brutal acquisition deal and the collapse of a long-term engagement, he had vanished into that sleepy seaside town with no clear intention other than to breathe, to disappear, to forget. And then, suddenly, one memory slipped into focus. A diner. Blue booths, checkered floors, the smell of bacon grease and sea air. He had gone there nearly every night, always sitting at the far end of the counter, avoiding conversation. And yet, there had been one waitress who always brought his coffee without asking, always remembered the way he liked his eggs, always smiled even when he never smiled back. She had hair like sunlight and eyes that searched for nothing. He reached for his phone and opened his gallery, scrolling through years of images, contracts, travel itineraries, gala events, until he found it. The photo was grainy, taken late at night, just outside that same diner. Someone else had taken it. He could not even remember who, but there it was, him, leaning against a post, eyes unfocused, and beside him, her. Laughing, her blonde hair pulled back in a loose braid, her face turned slightly away, caught mid-smile, one arm linked with his. A ghost of a night, long forgotten. He stared at it now as though seeing it for the first time. Kathy Harper. Not just a passing memory, not just another face in the blur of years gone by. He rubbed his temples, a low sigh escaping his lips. What had happened that night? He had been drinking, a lot, trying to drown the bitterness left behind by betrayal, by the coldness of the corporate world that always took and never gave. And she had been kind, quietly present, asking nothing in return. Just a soft voice, just patience. Had they? He could not remember everything clearly. There had been conversations, laughter, one too many bourbons, a walk along the beach. Then her apartment above the diner. And then nothing, just blank space where something important should have been. He stared at the photo again, at her, at himself, younger, wearier in a different way. And then he thought of Diana, the little girl in the lobby, 3 years old. His throat tightened. If she's mine, he whispered to no one, if she's mine, what kind of man does that make me? But then the fear came too. What if she's not? What if I'm imagining all of this? The uncertainty twisted inside him like a knot. He had built empires, bought companies with a signature, negotiated billion-dollar deals with the ease of casual conversation, but right now he was afraid of a child's question. Are you my daddy? He leaned back in his chair, still holding the photo in one hand. There were too many emotions he could not name. Regret, guilt, longing, and something deeper. Something that hurt in a way business never could. He had walked away from that town, from that diner, from that night, believing it was just another escape. But maybe someone had been left behind. Maybe two. And now, for the first time in years, David Ward did not know what to do. David could not stop seeing her face. Kathy's voice, soft yet strained, kept echoing in his head, the way she had clutched the child, the panic in her movements, the apology that trembled through every syllable. It haunted him far more than he expected. It was not just recognition anymore, it was gravity. He had not spoken to her, had not approached, not yet. It felt too sudden, too intrusive, like barging into a life that clearly had been moving forward, without him. Instead, he chose something quieter. He called his head of HR and gave simple instructions. There is a woman, Kathy Harper. I want you to reach out and offer her a part-time support position in our downtown office. Flexible hours, decent pay, no special treatment, no explanations, just find a way to make it available to her. There was a pause on the other end. Do we know her qualifications? Good enough, David said. She deserves the chance. The paperwork went through quickly. A routine hire buried in the dozens of daily processes within the company. No red flags, no suspicions. Just one envelope mailed to a tiny apartment across the city. Kathy stood by the door holding it for several minutes before opening it. Her name was printed in sharp black ink across the front. The return address was embossed, Ward Enterprises. She blinked. Opening it, her hands trembled slightly. Inside was a letter inviting her to interview for a part-time administrative support role at one of the company's satellite offices. The pay was significantly higher than anything she had earned in the past 3 years. The hours were adjustable. Benefits, even for part-timers, were generous. There was no mention of who referred her. Just a polite, professional offer. She glanced over at Diana, who had fallen asleep on their worn couch with a book still clutched in her hands. Kathy sat down slowly, the letter resting in her lap. Maybe this is it, she whispered. Maybe this is the break we need. But her heart felt heavy, unexplainably so. She looked at her daughter again, eyes softening. Sweetheart, she murmured, I think Mommy's getting a chance at something new. But why does it scare me so much? The following week, she arrived at the office, nerves wound tight beneath her modest blouse and borrowed shoes. She walked into the lobby with cautious steps, clutching her bag like armor. Everything was too clean, too perfect. The interview itself was brief, and the hiring manager, pleasant but unreadable, welcomed her with practiced professionalism. She left the building with a job offer and more questions than answers. Why her? Why now? She wanted to feel grateful. She did feel grateful, but something deep inside whispered uncertainty. Elsewhere in the building, David stood by the window of his high-rise office, hands in his pockets, watching as Kathy exited through the revolving doors below. He could see the tension in her shoulders, the way her steps faltered slightly at the edge of the sidewalk. She was holding herself together, but only just. He did not call her name, he simply watched. Every day after that, he found himself glancing at the security feed more than he should have. Not to spy, but to see. She was punctual, polite, quiet. She kept her head down, did her work well, and went home the moment her shift ended. She never lingered, never complained. She did not know he was there, and yet that was enough for now. Then came the rain. One gray afternoon, the city opened up in sheets of water. Kathy was leaving the office, clutching Diana's small hand as they stepped out onto the sidewalk. Kathy's coat was thin, and Diana was wrapped in the same beige scarf from the lobby that day. The little girl huddled close under her mother's arm, trying to stay dry. David was already near the building's entrance, having just exited a meeting on the ground floor. He saw them across the plaza. The moment carved itself into him. He stepped forward, quietly, and extended an umbrella toward them without a word. Kathy froze for a second, startled. Then her eyes lifted to meet his. For the first time, their gazes locked. Recognition sparked there, faint, uncertain. She looked at him as if she almost remembered but was not sure why. His expression was unreadable, but his eyes were soft, tired. She took the umbrella slowly. "Thank you," she said, voice cautious. He nodded once and turned to go, walking off into the rain without cover, his suit already dampening at the shoulders. Kathy stood still for a moment, watching him disappear into the storm. Then she looked down at Diana, tucked the umbrella above them and whispered, "Some people are not what they seem at first." That night she dried the umbrella carefully before setting it aside. She did not know who the man was. She did not even know his name. But for the first time in a long while something inside her stirred, a fragile flicker of something that was not quite hope. Just a pause, just the hint of warmth where cold had lived for far too long. The fluorescent lights of the office hallway buzzed softly above, the late afternoon lull settling in like a sigh. Most of the staff had retreated to their desks, lost in emails and to-do lists. Kathy walked with a stack of files in her arms, making her way toward the small copy room tucked at the end of the corridor. She pushed the door open with her shoulder, balancing the papers against her chest, and stepped inside. The air in the room was warm, the hum of machines echoing softly. Then the door opened from the other side, and David walked in. Neither of them spoke. Their eyes met, sharp, raw, and immediate. The weight of 4 long years came crashing down in a heartbeat. David froze, his hand still on the door handle. Kathy stood completely still, papers slipping slightly in her arms, her breath caught in her throat. He opened his mouth, but no words came. Kathy blinked once, and then she turned. She did not speak. She did not scream. She just ran. Through the hallway, past curious glances, down the stairs, skipping steps, her breath growing ragged. Her heart pounded in her ears, louder than the world around her. She did not know where she was going, only that she had to get out. David was right behind her. "Kathy, wait!" But she did not wait. She burst through the main doors of the building and out onto the street, her arms clutching herself, as if trying to hold together everything inside her that was breaking apart. The sky was gray again, the wind colder than before. Cars zoomed by, horns blaring in the distance. She stepped off the curb without looking. A black sedan came around the corner. Too fast. "Look out!" David shouted. He lunged forward and grabbed her by the waist, pulling her back onto the sidewalk just as the car screeched past, narrowly missing them both. They stumbled and fell hard onto the concrete. For a moment, neither moved. Both were breathing fast, hearts pounding, adrenaline surging. Then Kathy sat up, and she began to cry. It was not a loud cry. It was silent, broken, tears streaming down her cheeks as her hands trembled in her lap. She did not look at him. David knelt beside her, chest still heaving. "Kathy," he said, barely above a whisper. She finally turned her head and their eyes met again. This time there was no confusion, no doubt, only pain. His voice cracked as he spoke. "The little girl, Diana, is she my daughter?" She stared at him, her mouth parting slightly, her eyes already glistening with fresh tears. Her voice trembled when she answered. "Yes," she said. "She is." He exhaled shakily, a strange wave of relief and dread washing over him at once. But before he could speak again, she added, her tone firm, sharp as glass, "But she is only mine now." David's face fell. Kathy stood slowly, brushing off her skirt with trembling fingers. "You never came back," she said quietly, eyes fixed on the ground. "Not a call, not a message. You left. And I waited. Stupidly. I hoped. But I was just someone who helped you forget your pain. A night that meant nothing to you." David stood, shaking his head. "Kathy, I didn't know, I swear. I didn't even remember that night clearly until recently." "That's exactly it," she snapped, her voice cracking. "You didn't remember. But I did. Every day. I lived with it. I carried her. I gave birth to her alone. I watched her first steps, heard her first words, cried every night wondering how I would feed her the next day. And where were you?" Her voice broke again. "Where were you when she asked why she didn't have a daddy like the other kids?" David had no answer. He stepped closer, but she took a step back. "I'm not here to punish you," she said, wiping her eyes. "I've made peace with it. I chose to keep her. I don't regret it. But don't come into our lives now thinking you can just fix it." "I don't want to fix it," he said softly. "I just want to be a part of it." She looked at him, exhausted. "You don't get to decide that alone anymore." And with that, she turned and walked away, her back straight despite the shaking in her limbs. David watched her go, standing on the edge of the sidewalk like a man who had just missed a train he never realized he needed to catch. The city kept moving, but something in him had stopped. Kathy did not see him again after that day, not at the office, not outside the building, not in the lobby or by the elevators. He had disappeared, just as quickly as he had reappeared into her life. And yet, traces of him began to surface. It started with a new pair of shoes for Diana, shoes that fit perfectly, better than anything Kathy could afford. Then came a small box of crayons and art supplies, delivered anonymously to their apartment door with no note. The next week her daughter found a storybook about castles and kindness tucked gently into their mailbox. And then there were the cookies. Diana's favorites, soft oatmeal with chocolate chips, from a bakery across town Kathy could never justify spending money at. They showed up one afternoon, left at the front desk of their apartment building with Diana's name written in careful handwriting. Kathy knew. She never said it aloud, but she knew. It was him. He was not pushing, not demanding, just there, quietly, invisibly, offering, and somehow that hurt more than his absence. Weeks passed. Kathy kept her head down at work. She focused on her tasks, brought Diana to and from daycare, and tried to convince herself that her heart was not softening, that she did not catch herself listening for footsteps in the hallway or glancing toward the lobby just in case. Then one Thursday afternoon, she arrived at Diana's daycare a little earlier than usual. She pushed open the front gate, expecting to see the kids finishing snack time or cleaning up crayons. Instead, she stopped in her tracks. David was sitting cross-legged in the grass, a cardboard box in front of him. He was helping Diana and two other children build what looked like a castle, complete with paper towel towers and popsicle stick flags. His shirt sleeves were rolled up, his expensive shoes were stained with glue, and he was smiling. A real smile, not the one she had seen in newspapers or boardrooms. Diana was giggling, pressing glitter stickers along the castle walls. "Are you Dad?" she asked in her sweet, unfiltered way. "Really?" David froze just a second, then laughed, brushing a strand of hair from Diana's cheek. "I'm someone who thinks you're pretty amazing," he said gently. "Is that okay?" Kathy stood at the fence, watching. Something in her chest cracked open. She saw the man she once knew, but not exactly. He was different now, softer, quieter, learning. He was not trying to take anything. He was not insisting on a role. He was simply showing up, without asking for thanks or forgiveness. And maybe that meant something. That night, Kathy sat beside Diana on their small couch while her daughter showed off the sparkly paper crown David had made her. The girl's eyes shone with joy. "Mommy," she said seriously, "can he come again tomorrow?" Kathy smiled softly, brushing her fingers through Diana's curls. "We'll see," she said, but she did not say no. From that moment on, David became a quiet rhythm in their lives. He would drop off snacks at daycare, help with art projects, offer rides when it rained, but never pressed when she said they would walk. He never called himself Dad, never asked for anything in return. He simply stayed. Some afternoons, he and Diana would sit on the park bench across the street, watching pigeons and talking about dreams. Kathy would watch from a distance, pretending not to look. One day, Diana drew a picture of the three of them, stick figures, holding hands under a bright yellow sun. Kathy found it tucked into her purse after work. She stared at it for a long time. She did not cry, but her fingers traced the lines slowly, as though memorizing the possibility of something she never thought she could have. Love, she realized, was not always loud. Sometimes it was just presence. Sometimes it was staying, even when you had been told to go. The park was quiet in the late afternoon, painted in golden hues as the sun dipped lower behind the trees. Leaves rustled gently in the breeze, and the air held that peaceful stillness found only between seasons, between endings and beginnings. David and Kathy sat on an old wooden bench near the playground. A few yards away, Diana ran barefoot through the grass, chasing after bubbles that floated up from a plastic wand one of the other kids had brought. Her laughter, high and free, rang across the open space. Neither of them spoke for a while. There was no awkwardness in the silence, just a kind of calm that had taken weeks to find, the kind that settles when two people have already said so much without words. David leaned forward, resting his elbows on his knees, hands clasped. His gaze stayed on Diana. "She's amazing," he said softly. Kathy nodded. "She's everything." He let out a breath. "I should have been there." "For both of you." Kathy looked down at her hands, folded neatly in her lap. The breeze played gently with the ends of her hair. "I didn't want your pity," she said after a pause, "or your guilt. That's why I pushed you away." "I know," he said quietly. "I thought I'd made peace with everything," she continued, her voice barely above a whisper. "But seeing you again, it shook things I thought I had buried." David turned toward her then. He did not reach for her, just watched her, letting the weight of her words land. "I was a coward," he said, "back then. I ran from pain, from responsibility, from anything that felt real." She glanced at him. "But I'm not running anymore," he added. She searched his face, lined with the kind of weariness that did not come from work, but from trying to mend what had been broken. David looked out at Diana again, then back at Kathy. "I know I was just a stranger who drifted into your life one night and disappeared just as fast, but somehow that night gave me the only thing I never knew I needed." He paused. "And now, all I want is to stay, to earn a place, not because I'm her father, but because I want to be, because I want to be yours too." Kathy's eyes shimmered. "David?" He reached for her hand gently. "Please," he said, "don't close your heart because of who I was. Let me be the man who stays. Let me be your home. Let me call you family." She did not speak for a moment. Then she said, almost laughing through the tears in her throat, "You're a CEO? I'm a single mom who uses food stamps. We are not from the same world." David's grip on her hand tightened just slightly. "Then I'll leave mine," he said, "because my world means nothing if it doesn't include both of you." Kathy looked at him, and what she saw was not the powerful businessman from the headlines, not the figure from her memories, but the man in front of her now, present, humbled, and hopeful. She leaned in, slowly, resting her head against his shoulder. They sat like that for a long while. Then a little voice rang out. "Mommy! Mr. David! Are you going to kiss now?" They turned just in time to see Diana running toward them, giggling. Behind her, a group of other children had noticed and begun to chant, "Kiss, kiss, kiss." Kathy laughed, her face turning a shade of rose. David chuckled, glancing down at her. She rolled her eyes with a smile and whispered, "You better, or they won't let us leave." He leaned in, just enough for their foreheads to touch, and then kissed her softly, gently, like a promise. The children erupted into cheers. Diana threw her arms into the air. "They're in love!" The moment felt surreal. Simple, pure, a beginning, not built on perfection, not defined by status or blood, but by choice. The choice to forgive, to stay, to be a family not because they had to, but because they wanted to. And in that golden light, with laughter in the air and hearts finally open, they became one. 1 year later, the morning air was soft and golden, filtering through the white curtains of a modest but cozy chapel tucked behind a row of maple trees. It was not the grand ballroom of a 5-star hotel, nor the sweeping estate of a millionaire, but it was perfect. Friends and family gathered on wooden benches, strung with wild flowers, the scent of lavender mixed with the soft piano melody playing in the background. The bride stood at the end of the aisle, her white dress simple and elegant, her blonde hair falling in gentle waves down her back. Kathy glowed, not with diamonds, but with something deeper: peace, wholeness, love. David waited at the altar, his suit tailored, but his smile was what lit up the room. And in front of her, walking proudly in a little ivory dress with flowers in her hair, was Diana, their flower girl, their daughter, their greatest blessing. She held the rings on a velvet pillow with both hands, grinning from ear to ear. When Kathy reached David, they did not speak right away. They just looked at each other. The room faded, the guests blurred, and for a moment it was just them. Two people who had traveled through mistakes, forgiveness, and healing to arrive right here. They exchanged vows, not for show, but for truth. No grand metaphors, just promises to stay, to try, to show up every day, not perfectly, but fully. When the ceremony ended, Diana threw petals into the air and shouted, "They're married! They're really, really married!" Everyone laughed. Some cried. Kathy did both. There were no gold-plated invitations, no paparazzi, no corporate speeches. Just real people, real joy, real love. The next morning, sunlight crept through the window of their small kitchen. The smell of pancake batter and butter filled the air. David stood at the stove, wearing a striped apron far too colorful for his usual taste, flipping pancakes with surprising skill. Kathy stepped behind him, wrapping her arms around his waist and resting her cheek on his back. "You're getting good at that," she murmured. "I've had the best motivation," he replied with a smirk. Just then Diana ran in, her pajamas rumpled, hair a mess of curls, and wrapped her arms around both of them. "Why?" she said. "Do you think the best motivation is ramping around filthy people in purple sweaters? Daddy's pancakes are the best in the whole world," she declared. They all laughed. In that moment, no limousines, no headlines, no titles, just the smell of syrup and warmth and love. They were exactly what they had chosen to be. a family. Not by fate, but by choice. Thank you so much for watching this heartwarming journey of love, forgiveness, and second chances. If this story touched your heart, made you smile, or even brought a tear to your eye, we invite you to become part of our growing community. We share real, powerful stories that stay with you long after the screen fades. Don't forget to hit the bell so you never miss a story that could change your day or even your life. Because sometimes the most powerful stories are the ones that stir your soul.